Good morning, I'm Maiki Oreta and you're watching Business 360, where we break down the numbers, connect the dots, and give you the developments and the insights you need to navigate, adapt, and lead. Let's dive right in. Philippine exporters may see lower profits this 2025 amid ongoing uncertainty over U.S. tariff policy. President Marcos begins the rollout of 20 peso rice in a bid to make basic food more affordable nationwide. And the government is studying the use of defense bonds to fund the AFP's modernization amid growing security challenges. First, let's take a look at how global financial markets performed overnight, with investors responding to fresh signals on the U.S.-China trade front. U.S. stocks closed higher Wednesday, lifted by renewed optimism that tensions between Washington and Beijing may be easing. Markets gained momentum after Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called the current tariff levels unsustainable, and President Trump indicated a willingness to roll back some of the trade barriers between the world's two largest economies.
We believe that the worst is likely behind us because of all of this bearishness that's been abounding. And as a result, that while we might end up bouncing along the bottom for a little bit, that we do believe that the market will be working its way higher, recoup all of its losses by year end, and continue to work higher as we move into 2026.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 1%, the S&P 500 climbed 1.7%, and the Nasdaq led the gains, up 2.5% on tech strength. Over in Europe, stocks also closed in positive territory. The UK's FTSE 100 added 0.9%. Germany's DAX surged 3.14%, and France's CAC 40 gained a little over 2%. Investors worldwide continue to track developments in trade talks closely, with any shift in tariff policy expected to have ripple effects across export-driven economies, including the Philippines. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, or the BSP, is tightening regulations on the buying and selling of foreign currencies in a move designed to curb excessive speculation and safeguard market integrity. The new rules aim to ensure that foreign exchange contracts are not used primarily for currency speculation, where traders buy or sell currencies to profit from short-term price movements rather than for trade or investment purposes. Under Circular Number 1212, signed by BSP Governor Eli Romolona Jr., banks engaged in non-deliverable forex derivatives are now required to ensure that such transactions serve legitimate economic purposes. The BSP is also streamlining compliance, allowing banks to submit supporting documents for foreign exchange transactions electronically. The measure is part of the central bank's broader effort to promote a sustainable and transparent foreign exchange market, one that supports trade, investment, and economic growth. The earnings of Philippine exporters could take a hit this year amid uncertainty surrounding U.S. tariff policy, a key risk for trade-dependent industries. Nelson Mendoza, the president of the United Port Users Confederation of the Philippines, says several export shipments have been put on hold due to the inconsistency in U.S. tariff policy. He stresses that the biggest concern right now for many exporters is the lack of clarity as U.S. tariffs continue to shift. Their goods remain stuck in ports, affecting both cash flow and contract commitments. Former U.S. President Donald Trump, who is expected to return to power in November, has imposed a 90-day pause on the implementation of steeper tariffs, adding to the uncertainty. The situation highlights the vulnerability of Philippine exporters to external policy shocks and the growing need to diversify markets amid global trade volatility. President Marcos delivers on a campaign promise, launching rice at 20 pesos per kilo in a bid to make staple food more affordable for Filipinos amid persistently high living costs. The president, together with Agriculture Secretary Francisco Tu Laurel, travels to the Visayas to formally launch the initiative. Malacanang says that the program will be rolled out nationwide, with a directive to the Department of Agriculture to ensure its long-term sustainability.
Kailangan sa mga regions na yun But of course, ang eventual intention nitong programa na to, once we sort out all the issues logistically and para makita talaga how to operate it, and launch it and manage it, nationwide to eventually.
The announcement has drawn mixed reactions. Vice President Sara Duterte is questioning the quality of the rice being distributed, even suggesting that it may be the type usually used for animal feed.
Sa totoo lang, nung sinabi yung 20 pesos per kilo na bigas, ay nagsinungaling yung nagsabi. Alam niyang hindi kayanin, pero pinaasa niya ang mga tao na ibibigay yon.
While the 20 peso rice initiative is being welcomed by many consumers, economists say that its long-term viability will depend on how the government balances price stability with support for local farmers and the broader implications for agricultural policy and public spending. Now, with global trade tensions on the rise, one data center infrastructure giant is reconfiguring its supply chain strategy to stay ahead of disruption. Sujin Kim has the details.
Amid volatile trade developments, data center infrastructure giant Vertiv admits a growing sense of market caution across several sectors.
I think at the moment the main impact of tariff that people are seeing is confidence. There's a little bit of a slowdown in confidence from the marketplace. So, whether it be building data centres or looking at pharmaceuticals or looking at IT manufacturing, everyone's just got a little bit of a pause at the moment.
To counter the risk, Vertiv is actively adapting its supply chain, shifting production to strategic regions to minimize vulnerability to trade shocks.
We will have a bit of exposure, like many companies will. The tariff rules are changing daily. We manufacture in China, we manufacture in India, we're manufacturing in this region in the future, and a lot in Europe products. So that way we can balance out the impacts of tariff.
Despite these headwinds, the company remains bullish, projecting double-digit growth in the next 3 to 5 years, driven by accelerating demand for AI, cloud computing, and smart infrastructure solutions. In the Philippines, where energy costs are among the highest in the region, Vertiv is prioritizing energy efficiency as a core design strategy.
One of the misconceptions too is that even though these AI data centres consume lots of energy, the energy that they consume per unit of IT processing is far more efficient than the old data centres ever were.
From liquid cooling technologies to clean power alternatives, Vertiv continues to innovate in high-efficiency infrastructure, a crucial edge in a market where every kilowatt counts. Sujin Kim, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
The Philippine government is considering a new fundraising strategy to modernize its military amid heightened tensions in the West Philippine Sea. The plan involves issuing so-called defense bonds, a move that would tap capital markets to help fund the country's national defense. Finance Secretary Ralph Recto says that he will meet with Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro to discuss the department's budget requirements and determine the feasibility of the bond sale. Secretary Teodoro has expressed interest in raising funds through the debt market, citing budget constraints that limit the full implementation of the Armed Forces Modernization Program. He is currently awaiting final clearance from President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Secretary Recto before moving forward. Recto says his approval will depend on the Defense Department's final funding estimate and strategic needs. The Defense Bond Initiative marks a potential shift in how the Philippines funds its security modernization at a time when maritime tensions continue to test national defense readiness. Japanese Prime Minister Ishiba Shigeru is set to visit the Philippines from April 29th to the 30th in a diplomatic trip that could strengthen economic ties and bolster security cooperation amid heightened tensions in the region. President Marcos will welcome the Japanese leader in Malacanang, according to the palace. The visit aims to enhance economic and development cooperation while also deepening political and defense engagements between Manila and Tokyo. The talks will also cover regional security, including new pathways for peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific as both countries navigate rising maritime challenges and supply chain risks. The visit marks a continued push to strengthen strategic partnerships as the Philippines seeks to balance trade, security, and diplomacy in an increasingly complex global landscape. We're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and the narratives that matter most to your bottom line. Welcome back. Let's check on how Asian markets are moving this morning. Right now, the Nikkei 225 is in the green, higher by almost 1%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index in the red, lower by 0.4%. Shanghai Composite in the green, up by 0.2%. And Singapore's Straits Times Index higher by 0.25%. Here at home, Philippine shares extended their winning streak for a third straight session on Thursday, tracking gains on Wall Street. The main gauge climbed 0.4% to close at 61.68 as investors brushed off trade tensions and took cues from a broader global rebound. In the near term, market momentum remains cautiously optimistic, with investors looking ahead to fresh signals on U.S.-China trade talks and overall global risk sentiment. Now, here at home, as of 10:13 this morning, the main gauge is flat with a downward bias, lower by 0.1% to 61.63. All shares index flat with a slight upward bias, up by less than 0.1%. As for the sub-indices, we're seeing a mixed picture. The financials and the services counters are in the red, whereas the industrial, holding firms, property and mining and oil counters are in the green, with the mining and oil counter up by 1.25%. Volume of trades is at about 30 million. Value is at a little over 1 billion. We've got 64 advancers, 40 decliners, while 41 are unchanged. Now, at the currency market, the peso opened slightly stronger at 56.50 to the dollar, up from Wednesday's close of 56.55. Senator Sherwin Gatchalian is pushing for stronger consumer protection, filing a bill to stop abusive debt collection practices, especially from online lending platforms. Under the Senate Bill number 818, or the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the proposal seeks to ban harassment, threats, and public shaming, often linked to some online lending apps. Gatchalian says lenders have the right to collect debt, but stresses that it must be done in a legal and respectful manner. The senator is also urging the Securities and Exchange Commission to impose stricter registration rules for online lending companies to help ensure that borrowers are protected from unfair practices. The bill aims to balance the growing role of digital lending in the country with a need to safeguard consumer rights in a rapidly changing financial landscape. Transportation Secretary Vince Dizon is moving to tighten road safety and improve traffic enforcement across the country. He has created a special task force to review key systems, including driver licensing, vehicle inspections, and traffic management. Our mobility correspondent, G. Baroga, tells us what's in the works.
After a surge in road accidents during Holy Week, Transport Secretary Vince Dizon is hitting the brakes and taking the wheel. He's pulled together a powerhouse task force made up of the DOTR, LTO, LTFRB, and the PNP Highway Patrol Group to give the country's traffic rules a serious tune-up.
Clearly, yung mga polisiya ngayon, yung mga proseso ngayon, hindi epektibo. Yung roadworthiness, kailangan yan talagang chinecheck. Chinecheck ang makina, chinecheck ang preno, chinecheck lahat. Lalo na para sa mga truck at sa mga bus.
Everything is under review, from how licenses are given out to how vehicles get inspected and cleared for the road. And Secretary Dizon isn't just talking. He's already taken action and revoked the license of Mark Louis Burgos, a bus driver caught speeding in La Union. Effective April 23rd, over 600 licenses have been suspended for 90 days. Nearly 100 of these license owners tested positive for illegal drugs.
Yung pagbigay sa iyo ng lisensya na ginagamit mo para sa kabuhayan mo, para kumita ka, pribilehiyo yan na binibigay sa iyo, pero may kaakibat yan na responsibilidad na pangalagaan mo ang sinasakay mo, pati na rin ang sarili mo.
Meanwhile, LTO Chief ASEC Vigor Mendoza says over 1,100 vehicle owners are being served show cause orders for failing basic roadworthiness tests.
In my last 2 years at the LTO, we have never reached this level. We are really hell-bent with the instruction of the Secretary. Road safety will not be compromised, and we will double time on this.
The LTO is also setting up 2 special teams, one to go after drug or drunk drivers and another to hunt down unsafe, poorly maintained vehicles. Written and practical exams may soon be required again, especially for motorcycle riders who are involved in nearly half of all road accidents last week. To support all this, the agency is investing in better testing equipment for buses and trucks.
Record data will again show that those that involve death and serious physical injuries, lahat doon, lahat na may bus and trucks, may ganung involvement. So we cannot help but focus on trucks and buses.
It's a long road ahead, but with task force on overdrive and reforms rolling out fast, the goal is clear: safer streets for every Filipino. For BNC Mobility, G. Baroga.
Nickel Asia Corporation, led by Bilyonaryo Manny Zamora, takes a significant hit, reporting a 1.9 billion peso loss from its investment in the Mindoro Geothermal Power Corporation, or MGPC. Documents obtained by Bilyonaryo.com reveal that the project failed to deliver on expectations and was a major factor behind the company's 50% drop in net income, which fell to 2.92 billion pesos in 2024. A technical review found that MGPC's existing wells produce only 18 tons per hour, far below the threshold needed to generate power using the planned technology. With that output, Nickel Asia has officially dropped the project. The setback underscores the challenges faced by Philippine energy investors as they pursue alternative power sources, and prompts further reflection on how to strengthen support for small-scale geothermal projects amid the country's shift toward energy security and sustainability. On another front, Bilyonaryo Lushotan's Philippine Airlines names British aviation executive Richard Nuttall as its new president, effective May 29th. In a statement, PAL says Nuttall previously led the turnaround of Sri Lankan Airlines, guiding the company to profitability during his tenure as chief executive. Lushotan III, president and COO of PAL Holdings, says that the appointment is part of their medium and long-term strategy to build a stronger management team and expand Philippine Airlines' international footprint. Last month, the flag carrier reported a full-year net profit of $151.1 million for 2024, marking its 4th consecutive year in the black. Nuttall takes over from Stanley Nang, who has served as president and COO since January 2022. Now, Bilyonaryo Lushotan's Tanduay Distillers Incorporated reports a net income of 2.16 billion pesos in 2024. This marks a nearly 40% increase from the 1.57 billion pesos recorded in 2023. Tanduay attributes the growth to a 2% rise in liquor sales volumes and a 1% increase in bioethanol sales. The company also maintains strong market positions, with 70.6% share in the Visayas and 79.6% in Mindanao, reinforcing its leadership in these regions despite challenges from weather disruptions and inflationary pressures. Nationwide, however, Tanduay's market share in distilled spirits slipped slightly to 32.2% in 2024, down from 32.9% the year before, amid heightened competition in the industry. President Bongbong Marcos and First Lady Liza Marcos are set to attend the funeral of Pope Francis this Saturday. No official details yet on when the first couple will depart for Rome. Among other world leaders expected to attend are U.S. President Donald Trump, Britain's Prince William, and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Pope Francis's body was brought to St. Peter's Basilica on Wednesday, where thousands of Catholic faithful have been paying their respects.
The ceremony will be solemn. It will be a funeral, an opportunity for Catholics around the world to mourn the Pope, who led the Catholic Church for 12 years. He was the first Pope from Latin America. And we'll have to see kind of how it unfolds, but it should be a pretty solemn ceremony. Based on previous papal funerals, there's not really a lot of time for sideline meetings or other events.
The Pope passed away on Monday at age 88 due to stroke and cardiac arrest. The Vatican has announced that he will be laid to rest at the Basilica of St. Mary Major in accordance with his final wishes. As world leaders prepare to gather in Rome for the funeral of Pope Francis back in Washington, a different kind of shift is underway. A major overhaul of the U.S. State Department is taking shape under the Trump administration. Plans are in motion to eliminate 132 of the more than 700 offices and bureaus under the department and to reduce staff by 15%. Among the offices facing possible closure are units focused on war crimes and human rights advocacy. The move is part of President Trump's effort to shrink the federal government and align U.S. diplomatic operations with his America First policy.
Today, under President Trump's leadership and at the direction of Secretary Rubio, we are reversing decades of bloat and bureaucracy at the State Department. The Secretary announced a reorganization plan to build an America First State Department to meet the challenges of a new era.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he wants billionaire Elon Musk to stay in government for a long time. The remark comes after Musk announced plans to reduce his government time commitment to just 1 or 2 days a week so he can focus on reviving Tesla, which recently reported a sharp drop in both profits and sales. Musk currently heads the Department of Government Efficiency, a key arm of the Trump administration tasked with shrinking the federal workforce and cutting the deficit through mass firings and reduced public services.
He loves the country. He didn't need to do this. He did it. And I told him, I said, you know, whenever you're ready, I'd like to keep him for a long time, but whenever you're ready, he's an exceptional guy. When you see those rockets go up and come back and land in the same gantry, nobody else can do that but this man.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he believes a peace deal is possible, claiming he has an understanding with both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to end the war in Ukraine. This comes despite comments from White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt, who said Trump is frustrated with the slow pace of talks and believes Zelensky may be moving in the wrong direction. Trump, however, stresses that he takes no sides, saying he supports neither Russia nor Ukraine, and that his priority is to stop the war.
It's a vicious war, and if I can help solve it, you know, we're not losing our soldiers, but we're losing soldiers, a lot of people. And if I can solve it because of a certain ability, that would be great. And if it doesn't happen, I will say that I think Russia is ready, and a lot of people said Russia wanted to go for the whole thing, and I think we have a deal with Russia. We have to get a deal with Zelensky, and I hope that Zelensky, I thought it might be easier to deal with Zelensky. So far it's been harder, but that's okay.
While the path forward remains uncertain, Trump's remarks signal a renewed push for dialogue and a possible opening toward a diplomatic resolution in one of the world's most prolonged and destructive conflicts. And that's it for Business 360. I'm Maiki Oreta. Thank you for joining us, and keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo news channel.